The audio that you're about to listen to was taken from our Instagram live stream.
Welcome, ladies, gents, and our non-binary friends to Spoiler Sleepover, a Nerd Camp Network production. I'm really excited about today. I'm a little nervous. Also, got an awesome guest, a good friend of mine I'm really excited to have on today, and we're going to be talking about something I've been trying to get him to talk about on the other podcast for a while now. So I'm not going to dick around anymore. I'm just going to bring my co-host in right now. I'm excited. This is going to be great.
Oh, hello. I didn't even see you there.
Yeah.
I'm just, casually smoking marijuana in my front yard, as one does.
Hey, that's totally fine. In the front yard. Oh, yeah, you can do that there.
It's totally legal. I work at a dispensary. I know that.
Yes. So, how have you... Well, first of all, everybody, welcome JB from Camp Nightmare. This is one of the hosts of our parent podcast, the producer, if you will, no.
I don't produce shit. I'm just the pretty one. That's all I do.
Yeah.
I tell dick and fart jokes, and Jordan makes me sound much funnier than I am in real life.
No, you're both naturally hilarious.
How are you? How's your week?
I am exhausted right now, but other than that, I'm good. Yeah. I just had a hell of a night last night at work. I bartended and ran a wedding at the same time.
How'd that go?
Honestly, the bartending was completely fine. I was slightly nervous at first, but once I was around it, I was like, oh yeah, no, I don't want this anymore. So I'm good. And I had so much fun. I had actually forgotten how much fun bartending can be.
Oh,
so
man.
Oh yeah.
I'm the opposite of that. I hate bartending
really?
now. Now that I'm sober, I hate bartending. I was a bartender for a very long time in my off time. I was a touring musician for a long time, but what that really means is that I had a bunch of Joe jobs that afforded me the latitude to leave for 6 months at a time. I loved bartending when I was drinking. I had such a tolerance for drunk people. Now that I don't drink, I have zero tolerance for drunk people. I'm immediately like, you're wasting your life, Lloyd. What are you doing? What, do you want this bourbon, Lloyd? I don't think you really want this bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I'm also salty and mean, so.
I just looked at everybody like they were toddlers. I was just like, you're a child. This is totally fine. Here's your baba. Go away.
Well, I have an 8-month-old, and when babies are basically just tiny drunk people. That's all they are. They are. I will say this: if you're lucky, they're tiny, happy drunks, right?
Yeah.
And thankfully, Charlie is 90% happy all the time. She does have moments where she gets a little crazy and a little out of sorts, but generally speaking, she's a very happy baby. So it's like having a happy drunk in my house all the time. And in that regard, I can appreciate a drunk person, but it's a baby, so she's not really drunk. Just so everyone heard me say that out loud on the internet. No, I did not get my child drunk. Yeah. Well, what did I read about New Hampshire today? Oh, there was a drag story time that happened somewhere in your state, and a bunch of Nazis showed up, and just stood
Yep.
outside the windows and like gave the Zig Heil and all that stuff, and it like didn't phase the drag queens at all. Like they were like, whatever.
No.
We're like, you think like it's kind of how I feel whenever somebody like significantly bigger than me tries to intimidate me, and I'm like, do you really think you're the first person your size to like try to bully me? Because no, like I've been this size since 6th grade. Like I've dealt with this.
Yeah, no, it's also not the first time this has happened. It's this group. So the group that did that, they're from Maine. They're not even from New Hampshire.
That checks out. That checks out. Maine's a great
so
state.
They crossed the border.
Okay, go ahead. They crossed the border.
Yeah, they cross the border. They do it all the time. So that spot is called Teetotaler. There are multiple locations. So there is a teetotaler that is also in Maine, and Teetotaler is owned and run by the LGBTQIA community.
Hell yeah, dude! Like, support queer business all day. It's
amazing. I mean, I've been repping just the queer pride all month for this specifically because we have this platform. Excellent. This is what our platform is for.
Well, let me ask you about that though, because like I have sort of a differing opinion about that. Like I feel like I appreciate what Pride is. I appreciate what Pride Month is. I appreciate that we set aside a month to honor our queer brothers and sisters and our queer non-brothers and sisters and our queer people in general. Our queer siblings, as you say. I've adopted that term, by the way. And I feel like a lot of people that are on your and I's level and on Camp Nightmares level, we sort of support the queer community all year round. And it can be very frustrating to me when I hear people say things like, why didn't you do like a whole month's worth of queer themed episodes? And it was like, because we do those all year round and I don't need to be performative and I don't need to exploit something that's not really about me being like a cisgendered, straight, white, middle-aged male. Like the last thing that I want to do is co-op a movement that's not really for me. When the BLM marches happened in 2020, at first I got like, real like white and angry about it.
Right.
Like, and was like, I'm an ally. I'm going to do everything I can to be an ally, blah, blah, blah. And I felt very performative very quickly into that. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's a person of color, and I was like, hey, what can I do like to be a better ally in general? And he's my friend Sully. He's so cool. He was like, you can use your privilege to open a hole and then step back and shut the fuck up and let the marginalized group occupy that hole and have that ability to speak. And so that's kind of the mindset that I take with a lot of the Pride stuff. A lot of stuff during Pride Month is I want to create space as opposed to occupy space. And I'm still happy to be a part of it. And I'm still happy to be an ally, and I'm still happy that we still have the freedom to do so. How has your Pride Month been? Has it been good? Like
it's been real uncomfortable, like completely transparent. Normally, I mean, year round, as a bisexual male, I'm out. People know it. I don't hide it. But Pride Month is the month where I can kind of be a little bit more like, hey, I'm going to bust out my merch that I don't always wear all the time. And I didn't really do that. Are we
talking like T-shirts, or are we talking like ball gags and like leather? Like
a little bit of both.
Because either way, I'm here for it. But like realistically, I need you to understand why. If you're just walking around with a ball gag in, people are going to be off. It's not really about being queer. That's about the ball gag.
Yeah, right. No, it's just, I mean, like a lot. The worst of the worst is currently happening down south. Like Florida is just a fucking dumpster fire right now.
Oh yeah.
But as you saw up here, we're dealing with it too.
Sure.
A few months ago, I was driving to my old job, and I have a Pride sticker on the back of my car. You've seen it.
I know.
Like this big.
It's enormous.
Huge.
It's enormous.
Yeah. There was a guy behind me who started Zeke Heiling at me and flipping me off.
Oh man.
This month alone, it's happened to me 2 more times. Like it's becoming a regular thing around here.
Sure.
So I'm I mean, I look like me. I can handle myself. I'm not too worried about it.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, people took guns around here. So like, if somebody wants to cross
It is
that
the live
line,
free or die state. Like, and y'all take that
yeah,
shit seriously.
yeah, it's been weird.
I hear you.
But once again, we've got this platform. Pretty much anybody that's followed us has been supporting us, has been there watching or listening. They're allies or they are part of the community.
Yeah, and
So we haven't had.
realistically, even if they're not, right? Because like Jordan and I have the
Mhm.
same, and we have a very similar fan base, I think. And we've occasionally dealt with the anti-Camp Nightmare person. And what I can never understand is like, if you hate us so much, like, why are you listening? Like, what? You know what I don't listen to? Dan Bongino or Bongino. You know who I don't listen to? Tucker Carlson, because I hate them.
Yeah.
Like, and consequently, I don't find myself going to Tucker Carlson's Facebook page and like commenting about how much I hate him. Like, it's really only one side that does that. And like, actually,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Like, there are plenty of liberals out there, I think, that make it a point to like go troll conservatives, and I'm here for that too. But generally speaking, when it comes to like the truly hateful shit, like there's really only one side that's spewing that stuff, and it's not my side.
Right.
So speaking of Florida, speaking of down south, so I work at a medical cannabis dispensary, which is the best job I've ever had. It's amazing. So I was working the front desk because it's literally they have to buzz you into a medical dispensary. I was working the front desk the other morning, and it was super busy. And there was a lady who was in line that was like being really impatient, and she died. And so she was like, "Hey, can you hurry this up? Like, I got to get to Florida." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And what I meant was, "I'm sorry it's taking so long to get you checked in." What she heard was, "I'm sorry you're going to Florida." So she responded to that statement with, "What the fuck is wrong with Florida?" And, I had to do some mental math very quickly. And I very quickly realized, oh, she thinks that I don't care for Florida, which isn't untrue in any way.
Right.
Like, I definitely don't care for Florida, but I wasn't expressing that to her in that moment. And I realized that I was being challenged, and the person that I am is like, well, let's do this. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I can't, I could probably think of a few reasons why I don't care for Florida right now. And she's like, what, you don't like beaches? And I was like, no, I don't like bigots. Like, it's not the
Yeah.
beaches that bother me. It's the trying to remove any semblance of like being a person of color or being a queer person. And then I realized that like I'm in a marijuana dispensary. It's literally like, this is like being in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. There's no reason to bring this
Right.
kind of like negative energy into what I do because I really love this job and I don't want it to get
Yeah.
negative. So I quickly diffused it and was like, you know what? Let's not even talk about it. Like, you're going to leave here happier than you were when you got here. So let's focus on that. But yeah, I mean, this, I feel like this year's Pride has been weirder in a lot of ways.
Mm.
I think on one level, I've seen a lot more empowerment from friends of mine in the queer community. I've seen a lot more like, hey, love is for everyone is great, but how about we focus on us not dying? And I've seen a lot of like bold statements like that made, which I'm here for.
Yeah.
And I've also seen an absurd backlash from people who are anti the LGBTQIA plus community. There's so many letters now. I'm so sorry. As an ally, I'm just like, you guys need to, like, as an ally, but also as a Virgo, like, someone needs to shorten that acronym. I get the inclusivity thing, and I'm all for that, but like,
Yeah.
there's got to be a way
I've
for us to be
actually-
inclusive in a more efficient way.
I've actually adopted it and just started calling it the Alphabet Army because at this point in time we've got half the alphabet. So
Well, I think at some point you guys should just add straight people to the list of the acronym and like just watch people's heads explode, right? Like just watch straight people be like, well, what do we do now that we're part of it? Do we just continue down the path of self-loathing, or how do we do? I feel like queer, Greg, to answer your question, I feel like queer is a good blanket term.
It is.
Here's what I got hung up on with queer is that I grew up at a time when queer was a pejorative term.
Same.
And it's like literally anything can be a pejorative term if your intent is there. You know what I mean? Like I can call
Mhm.
you a lovely person, but if my intent is to like say that ironically, like you're not, I don't mean it that way.
Right.
But from what I understand, Greg, queer is a pretty good blanket term. I think the reason I try to use the acronym as much as I can when I can is because it is about inclusivity and it is about, there are so many different demographics and cultures represented under that queer umbrella. It's
Yeah.
similar to, you know, when you refer to an African as African, like, yes, they are from the continent of Africa, but like, a Senegalese person is not the same as a South African person. And
Right.
but really at the end of the day, I think that it's, like I said, it's all about intent and it's all about, you can read intent in the way someone delivers their verbiage, right?
Absolutely.
And of course, there are certain catch-all rules to that. Like the N word is never okay. Period. I don't care what your intent was. And here's the thing: for any white person that's like, no, 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 I have a black friend that told me it's totally okay to use that word. My immediate question for them is, was that black friend surrounded by white people when they said that? Because that feels like how that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not okay. Well, that turned into a very different opening than we normally do.
It got
So
political as fuck. My bad. You know what it is?
I'm
Jordan
here
won't
for
let
it.
me.
I love
Jordan won't
it.
let me do that on Camp Nightmare. Like he will cut me off so hard if I start to get political. So I'm just like, I'm gonna use any platform I have.
We are that platform. Our opening tagline is "Welcome, ladies, gents, and our non-binary friends."
Excellent.
This is the platform for that. We don't hold back. It's also, we are spoiler sleepover. We're not just going to spoil a movie. We're going to tell you the truth about shit. Like, we're not holding back. Jason, Michael, and I really believe in this.
Oh, I've been
So,
watching. I've seen. You guys have
so
some. You
yeah.
guys have some opinions that are not even just your opinions, your specific opinions. Your way of delivering your opinions is very relevant to me. Like I'm very vehement and very adamant about the things that I believe and things that I hold to
Yeah,
be true.
same.
So I appreciate it.
That's why we get along so well anyway.
Exactly.
So,
Well, that because like whenever we go to cons together, I make Rob carry me around on his shoulders like Yoda, because he's like 6'9",
it's true.
and I'm not. Like I'm the opposite of that. In fact, if you
I'm
guys
a
look at
whole
any of the
giant.
if anybody watching or listening looks at any of the pictures that we've posted from any of the cons that we've been at together, just the height differences in those photos and the group photos are insane. Like, because like Jordan, you, Raven, fucking even Bree and Matt are all so much taller than me, and then there's just me, and you guys never like. Thankfully, you never put me on like the end of the shot. It's always JB like right in the middle, so that everything just sort of like dips down in a V to me.
Yeah.
Comes in
We
like
had a
that.
real that picture from this year was awesome. Like the last day picture where it was all of us is just so, it's aesthetically pleasing to my eye. I
Yeah.
look at that picture quite often. I'm like, this is a good picture. We did a good job with this one.
Man, I was
But
so sick in that picture. I was so still suffering from food poisoning in that picture, and like I
yeah,
tried. I hope I did. I tried my damnedest to not look as bad as I felt in those pictures. Like I thought I was gonna pull over on the way home and vomit like more than one time. All I can tell you kids is that if there's a food truck at the event you're at and they serve a burger that has homemade gravy from a food truck in it, do not eat that burger because that's what
don't
I
do
did.
it.
That's what I did, and I ended up getting food poisoning as a result.
You
So,
you're also making it seem like it was readily available.
right, I
It
sought
was
that
not
shit
readily
out. No,
available.
you're right. You're right. It's not like there was a dude walking around with like a big placard that said, "Hey, Gravy Burger." Like I went and
No.
found that food truck, looked through their whole goddamn menu, much of which was super safe and would not have caused me to expel my entire guts out both ends. And I chose the burger that I was like, this seems questionable. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Why not?
yeah. I don't know why I did that. Either
Oh
way.
man.
Speaking of
All right.
questionable body things,
Yes. So before we jump into the movie, we like to open every episode with a little segment we call "What's Been Keeping You Up at Night." The
oh, nice.
segment is, what have you been watching? What have you been listening to? What have you been reading? What have you been playing? Just basically in your free time, if you have free
Sure.
time.
Let's see, what have I been watching? So, you guys are gonna laugh at this. So, Karen and I have like a 2 to 3 hour window at the end of the day, after we put Charlie down to sleep around 6:30 or 7, she's being very gracious with me tonight. But I'm not part of the bedtime process right now. But so we have like a 2 to 3 hour window, and we are creatures of habit. We are
Mhm.
absolutely homebodies and creatures of habit. So we just finished watching Game of Thrones all the way through. It's my fourth time through. It's her second time through.
Jeez.
Right now, we're toggling between the Lord of the Rings extended editions and the Great American Bake Off. I know that you guys wanted me to say something like super cool and horror related, and I do watch that stuff. I watch that stuff on my time, which is very rarely, but like most of what I've been watching has been Great American Bake Off, which is weirdly filmed in England. So like they fly 10 Americans to I don't know if anybody watches Great British Bake Off or Great British Baking Show,
No.
which is amazing as well. Oh, it's incredible. It's on Netflix. It's awesome.
Okay.
So there's a great American version of it where they fly 10 Americans to England for some reason. Baby Spice from the Spice Girls hosts this show.
That's awesome.
Oh, it is. It is fucking great. And the
She
show
was
is amazing.
my favorite.
Really?
I had a crush on her when I was.
That's
Oh yeah, I love Baby Spice.
I've never been okay with the infantilization aspect of pop music in the late 90s. Like the whole Britney Spears, Baby Spice, like, oh, I'm a little baby. Don't you want to fuck a baby? Like that's no, I don't. That's weird. Why would I be into that? But yeah, so that I've been listening to a lot of like mid '90s folk stuff. I've been listening to like Mazzy Star, so we have this whole rule where we like hate baby music, and we don't want to ever play baby music for Charlie because it's just insidious and hate it. So instead, we play They Might Be Giants and Bare Naked Ladies because that's basically children's music. So I've been listening to a lot of that.
And the
I
Aquabats.
I mean, yeah, I don't think Karen's. She, so she's 2 years older than me. I'm 41, and Karen's 2 years older than me, and that 2 years makes a huge difference when it comes to like musical taste. I don't think that she really doesn't like ska, so I don't think the Aquabats is going to happen.
Bummer.
But I know. It's funny. We just ran into a buddy of mine today at the grocery store who's like the ultimate ska kid, and he's like my age, and he's still the ultimate. More than Matt Kelly. Like I feel like Matt Kelly from Horror Movie Night is low key like the biggest ska kid I've ever. Like he's not just a ska kid.
Yeah.
He's a church ska kid, and that's a real specific ska kid. Like
He's like super into like the super tones and
Yeah.
like
and
Five Iron Frenzy.
I know because I was also that kid. So like
Same here, obviously.
so like I have love for it, but at the same time, like I don't want to admit that I was that kid. But, and what have I been reading? I just started reading The Stand again because we're doing a big series on that with Camp Nightmare coming up here shortly in the future. Not quite yet because that's a huge source material of content to cover. But
Yeah.
so I just started reading The Stand, and I got like the ultimate non-abridged version of it. So it's like I don't know, like a couple thousand pages long, all small print.
Yeah.
And I've been playing a few things. So I've been playing Skyrim again because like I'm kind of always playing Skyrim.
Right.
I started Breath of the Wild again from the beginning because I never finished it, and I don't feel like I can purchase Tears of the Kingdom until I finish Breath of the Wild.
Makes sense.
And what else have I've been playing Final Fantasy VIII because I got the remastered version of that on Switch, and it's fucking incredible. And like I love Final Fantasy. But I mean, like all of this shit is relative to me because like I only get to do these things in moments when Charlie is not awake or I'm not at work. Like we're real big on Charlie like not having screen time because she's 8 months old, and like I don't want that to be the precedent that gets set. So like I just can't do any of those things when she's
Right.
inactive. You've been in my living room. Like I don't have a whole lot of room in my house, so like it's not like I can put her somewhere and then watch stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's it. You know, I'm always on the hunt for new literary suggestions. I feel like I've read so much in my life that it's hard for me. Like like I said, I'm a creature of habit. So it's hard for me, I think, to find stuff outside my wheelhouse that I would like, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah. I mean, I started reading a lot more just this year,
I know.
and I've kind of fallen off of it, but I'm trying to get back. I've been listening to more audiobooks recently, but I've been to the movies a few times just last week, honestly.
Nice.
So first of all, I finally saw Renfield.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It was fantastic. I was not expecting it to be nearly as gory as it was. I don't know why.
No one was. No one knew.
It was amazing.
It was.
I have to watch it again. I feel like I missed a few things throughout it, but I mean that movie is just a sprint the entire movie. But it was really good.
Yeah.
So I saw that. For Father's Day, I took my dad to the movies because he wanted to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Hell yes.
I was a wreck. Have you seen it yet?
Greg and I saw it together.
Crying.
Oh yeah, dude. All great. Like, but here's the thing about those movies, the Guardians movies specifically. Well, superhero movies in general, well, Marvel movies, I should say, not superhero movies. Marvel movies on the whole, and superhero movies on the whole, really, but Marvel movies specifically, and the Guardians movies even more specifically, there's something about a redemption arc, right? I think for me at least, there's something about watching someone who has made a lot of mistakes but isn't a bad person get their moment to like feel like not a bad person that absolutely wrecks me every time. And there's something about the vulnerability of the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy that wrecks me every time. And that shit is just turned up to 10 in volume 3.
Yeah. And I'm glad Chris Pratt was not a huge part of this movie too. Like that was the other thing. Like I'm with you on the hatred towards him. Like I can't stand him. And when I thought he almost died, spoiler sleepover, by the way, we spoil things here. When I thought he almost died, I was like, thank God. I was like, finally. And then.
So I think maybe Star-Lord is the only role that I actually really do like Chris Pratt in because it fits him so well. Like, I'm a big fan of the books as well, and Star-Lord is Chris Pratt. Like, he is that smug, cocky, kind of piece of shit bro guy. And what I love about the Guardians franchise is they don't shy away from that with Star-Lord, but they also give him the opportunity multiple times throughout that franchise to redeem himself in that, right? Like, he is literally the reason that the Thanos thing didn't end with Infinity War. Like, if he had just seen past his own hubris for 5 seconds, they would have beaten Thanos in Infinity War. And I love that those movies don't really give Star-Lord a redemption arc, right? They're like, nah, dude, you're going to go down as the guy that's like, when he sees Tony Stark again after the blip happens or whatever, Tony Stark still fucking hates him. Like, but like in Guardians 3, I feel like they ramp up how much of a dick Star-Lord is, and they also give you sort of a window into what it must feel like to be vulnerable for that person. And it's really beautiful in its own way. And, you know, for that brief 2 hours or so, like, I maybe don't hate Chris Pratt as much, but like then that movie ends and I'm like, oh right, you were in Zero Dark whatever, like fuck you. Like, you married Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, get out of here.
So a few days after that, I actually went back to the movies with my mom, just me and my mom, and we went and saw The Little Mermaid, and it was dope. Like, really good. I cried again. I have a heart. I have feelings. I cry at things. So,
I get it.
but it was great. It was beautiful. There was 2 new songs that weren't part of the original that were enjoyable. I think, it's not for everybody. I get it, but
I'm not laughing at you because you went to see Little Mermaid. I think that's awesome, and I'm all for is it Halle Berry?
Yes.
It's Halle Berry, right?
Yeah.
Like, I kept confusing it with Halle Berry, and I was like, Halle Berry's playing she's a little old.
Right?
I'm all for the inclusivity and the person of color getting to play a role that's been historically whitewashed, even though it's a mermaid and there's no race associated with mermaids. But and I fucking hate Disney on that level. Like, when Disney bought Lucasfilm and Marvel, I had to have a real come to Jesus, and one of those, like, so like everybody has that line in the sand when it comes from separating the art from the artist that they like. Like, as much as I know so many people that are like, oh no, dude, like if an artist does something bad, I'm never going to listen to their shit again. Everybody has that line in the sand where they're like, well, like for me, it's Ryan Adams, but like, and for a lot of people, it's Disney.
Yeah.
And for me, like it was Lucasfilm and Marvel. I have Disney Plus because I'm not going to miss a single second of anything Marvel or Lucasfilm. But I also hate Disney with like the white hot intensity of A Thousand Suns. And I want to believe that these live action versions of some of the cartoons that have historically been sort of problematic and insidiously anti-women and taught little girls that they just need to do nothing but sit there and wait for their prince to come, and taught little boys that it's their job to save women no matter what, and have like contributed so much to the culture toxicity that we live in now regarding gender relations. I want to believe that these live action movies do a lot to dispel that, but it just I don't see it. Like I see it as just like slapping some new paint on a shitty old jalopy and trying to resell it to people. And I've aged out that like it's so irrelevant to me now that like I won't spend time trying to find the good sides of it. But I am happy to hear that you liked it, and I'm happy to hear that it hits.
There's so much I could say about the movie, but that would be an entire episode's worth, and I don't want to like dive into it.
Sure.
But they really did like, yeah, they're trying to like cover up what the original was, but they made it relevant to the current world we're living in and made it, I don't know. At the end of the day, it was really beautiful. Once it hits Disney Plus, watch it. It's not long.
I mean, I'm probably not gonna. I'm probably not gonna. Like, I tried to watch The Lion King live action. I tried to watch Aladdin live action. The only one that I got through was Dumbo, and that's because it was Tim Burton.
I didn't watch it because it was Tim Burton. I don't like Tim Burton at all.
That's the only reason I watched that movie. Like, I mean, like, I tried to get to The Lion King live action. First of all, that movie was not live action. It was CGI. Like, why did they call that movie live action? It wasn't live action.
Nope.
It was shot inside a computer. But, like,
yeah.
I tried to watch that. I tried to watch Aladdin, and like neither one of them sat well with me.
Yeah. So I'll talk about what I've been playing recently, and then I'll get into these 2 TV shows I've been watching because these shows are amazing. But I started playing this game called Cult of the Lamb, and you have a Switch. It's like $20. Totally worth it. It takes like a dungeon grinder game and mixes it with Stardew Valley. So you're literally a lamb who's building a cult, and you have to like go rescue other woodland animals and induct them into your cult so they worship you. That's the whole game, dude. It is so much fun. I can play it for an hour and put it down and be fine. I could play it for 5 hours and still have fun.
Dude, I'll give it a try.
I watched the teaser trailer for it, and I was like, this seems ridiculous. And I was just like, I'm going to play it. I did, and I love it. It's so much fun. So I was listening to an episode of Horror Movie Night, and Matt Kelly had brought up that he was watching this show on Max, HBO Max, whatever the fuck, called The Rehearsal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's Zach Ruins Everything, right? Is it the same guy? Or not Zach Ruins?
It's, Nathan? No, it's the dude who does, Nathan. It's, yeah,
it's Nathan. It's the guy that does the Nathan Ruins Everything show. That makes me that shit spikes my anxiety. Like
this one was highly upsetting and like really confusing because I was like, by the time you watch all 6 episodes, you have no idea if any of it was real.
Well,
that was the other thing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't watched it, but I've read about it. Isn't the whole point of it that he sets up like rehearsals for people, like awkward situation rehearsals for people, to like work through some internal hang up that they have from what I understand, like the situations that he sets up are like truly nightmarishly awkward.
Some of them. So
if it's anything like Nathan Ruins Everything, like that show, I'm the guy that watches something and gets anxious with and for the character that I'm watching as it escalates to more awkward and anxious. Like I escalate with it. And Nathan Ruins Everything like really ruined me as it does.
No, this one was like there's like through every episode there's like one rehearsal that is like the carrying. They do like smaller ones throughout each episode, but it's this extremely Christian woman who wants to have a rehearsal of raising a kid. And so every 3 days, the kid ages 3 years, and they get these child actors to come in. And
Nope.
it is real upsetting because at one point, Nathan decides he's going to step in as the father and like try and like do it together with her. And he's Jewish. And she was like vehemently against any Judaism being mentioned. Like she ends up leaving and he ends up like deciding to go forward with this. And one of the child actors, I think it was like the 6-year-old actor, is not able to separate the fact that he's not his dad because he's being raised by a single mom. And it's so upsetting. Like I was just like, yeah, it's not for you. Don't watch it. It really was upsetting though. Like I was like, holy hell.
And when you add the evangelical Christian aspect to it, like that's a hard pass.
Yeah.
I just watched the Hillsong documentaries and the Duggar documentary on Amazon, and like that shit was so triggering for me. Like I grew up in that, like in the heart of that, and you know, my parents are retired pastors, and like sometimes it's fun to nostalgically think about like, ooh, church in the 90s. Most times it's you know, it's stuff like watching the Duggars documentary where it's like, I knew that family. Like I had my own family of Duggars at my private Christian high school where there was a child in each grade K through 12 the entire time I was there. All right,
so before we jump into the meat of the episode, the last thing I literally watched in one day, season 2 of The Bear just dropped on Hulu.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I don't know if you watched season 1,
I have not.
but it's the most accurate representation of kitchen life that I've ever seen.
I have a lot of friends that work in kitchens. I've worked in a lot of kitchens in my life. Worked in the service industry for most of my adult life. And everybody that I know that works in the kitchen that has seen that show has said the same exact thing, that it's just so fucking accurate.
Season 2 is great. It goes away from what season 1 was and focuses a little bit more on the main character and like where he's going. But this season was like a star-studded event. Like, holy hell. Every single episode, they were like, check out this person we got. Check out this. Yeah. Jamie Lee Curtis plays his mom.
What?
Yeah, buddy.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So,
all right, let's get into this, man.
Yeah, that's what's been keeping us up at night. So, today's episode is something that I've been wanting to hear JB and Jordan talk about on Camp Nightmare. It's just Cronenberg as in general. But we decided that we're going to do 2022's Crimes of the Future, not 1970s Crimes of the Future, which you can watch the entire movie on.
It has nothing to do with 2022 at all.
It's on YouTube. If anyone's curious and wants to watch the 70 version, not version, but the 70s version. I'm still going to say version. But yeah, so I am, as you are, we're both huge fans of Cronenberg. I love body horror in general. It's fucked up, but body horror is like, it's like a warm blanket and the cold side of the pillow all at the same time for me. It makes me happy. I love it.
We have opposite reasons for why we love it. I love body horror because it's one of the only genres of horror that legitimately makes me uncomfortable every time. Every time. It is literally like, it's a whole ritual for me to watch a new body horror film. Like, and body horror is one of the only genres that I will not look up anything about the movie before I watch it. Every time I watch body horror, I want to walk in, you know, a clean slate, just, you know, a new opportunity to be mortified by something. This movie in particular, I believe Greg and I watched it together actually for the first time. Did we already say the title? We didn't say the title yet, right?
We did.
Crimes of the Future. So when I found out that Cronenberg was making the first body horror that he'd made since Existenz in 1999, I went through a gamut of emotion where at first I was very suspect because I've been burned a lot recently by like formerly great directors making absolute garbage later in their career. James Cameron, look at you. Avatar, fuck you.
I went through that whole movie, by the way.
You watched
all of Avatar, the new one. Yeah,
I literally turned it on, and within no less than 5 minutes, I was like, fuck this movie, and turned it straight the fuck back off. Nah, that's
I wish
not
I'd
even
done
like
the same thing.
I couldn't even watch that. It's like it's so bad that like you can't even ironically watch it the way you would like watch The Room, right? Like,
Mm-mm.
right? Because there's no chance that
No.
like James Cameron's trying to make some sort of ironic statement about bad filmmaking. Like, no, he really thinks that this is like the future of sci-fi. But so I went through that with
Yeah.
Cronenberg, and
And
then
it's
I went
not.
and then I went from there to well, he's probably not as good as he used to be because he's been hasn't done this for almost 30 years. And eventually, I got to the place where after I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, like this looks like some classic Cronenberg to me, and it is. If
Yeah.
anything, it's almost like overly Cronenberg. And I wonder if that was in an effort on his part to be like, I'm back, I haven't lost it, because there are a
So
number of moments in this
it it
movie
it
where
it actually was. So he'd been sitting on this script for 20 years.
right
He wrote the
since like
script in
2003, right?
98. It
Yeah.
was 98. So yeah, like he'd been sitting on it for a long time. And when he finally decided to go forward with it and actually make the movie, he was like, all right, I'm going to tell my story, but I'm also going to like mention every other movie I've done in small little ways.
Sure.
So throughout the entire movie, there are little, head nods towards his past
Oh yeah.
films, even when it just comes down to aesthetics for certain things. Like
Yeah.
we'll get into it, but like the rip lock, that stomach thing, that the zipper on the stomach
Oh
is
yeah.
straight up Videodrome.
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, and
but yeah,
all the
so
gadgets that attach to him for various reasons, those are all nods to Existence, in my opinion. And I would
yeah,
almost call this movie Existence Part Two, only because I could make a really strong argument for why this is a direct sequel to that film. In terms of the statement about society, like where society is in this film versus where it was in Existence. This whole movie is predicated on the idea that after ruining the planet, human beings adapt to it. We adapt to our own
right,
ruination. Is like that's the foundation that this movie is built on. That human beings have started to. It's like a nebulous time in the future. They don't really tell you how far in the future it is ever, but like it's far enough that I don't think we'd be alive still during this time period. Maybe our kids would. Definitely their kids would. And
yeah,
it's based on the idea that people have ruined their world and then adapted to that ruination because we are such a virus that like we can't kill ourselves. And we have
yeah,
started to adapt to the point where we can process plastic and toxic waste like it's food because that's the only abundant resource we still have. And we have
right,
lost we have evolved to the point where we no longer have pain receptors, so we can now have surgery wide awake, right? Like we no longer have
yeah.
pain receptors. We've adapted to eat trash essentially, and just that as the foundation is so very Cronenberg. He does not have a lot of hope for us as a species. I don't think.
No, it's interesting too because so I watched a few interviews with him after I watched the movie the first time, and he had actually brought up the fact that when he wrote this back in the 90s, he was like, by the time I actually want to make this, technology is going to be so far ahead that this is going to just seem ridiculous.
It's going to seem silly.
And
Yeah.
he was told straight up, he was like, no, like you live in sci-fi. This is what the world needs to see this. So he made the movie and then found out the same year that there is a company that has actually developed a plastic that humans can eat. So it exists. It's like, all right,
Yep.
great.
I mean, it's life imitating art.
Literally.
Yeah, so I will
Um,
say that
all right.
right off break with this movie, when Greg and I are watching it, in the first 5 minutes of this film, Greg and I both said "what the fuck" and no less than 5 times. It's like once per minute in the
Mm-hmm.
first 5 minutes of this film. It literally opens with a kid that can eat plastic, and that kid's mom just offing him, and offing him in the worst possible
Yeah.
way. She literally smothers him with a pillow, and this is one of those scenes where it's like, man, is he gonna cut away? Nope. Like you got to watch the entire thing. This is a very Cronenberg thing to do, by the way, is make you sit through the entire awful process of something, right? Like that's kind of his signature take on body horror is that whenever there's a really uncomfortable or awful thing that involves the body in some way, he doesn't just give you quick cuts, right? Like he makes you sit through the whole goddamn thing. And he does that with this, right? Like that you sit there until that kid is dead. And then his mom calls a nebulous something on the phone and tells them to have this kid's father come get what he says is their son. And you know, and to pause on that for a second, that's sort of the way that she reacts to that kid is sort of a very strong statement about hate mongers in modern society, right? That they do not see their opposition as human, that immediate dehumanization. Right. And, you know, it's, you know, you're talking about the evangelical thing playing out in that scenario. And I can tell you personal experience, like the first thing that happens when you really break bad with the church is that they dehumanize you, because it's a lot easier to wish for your eternal damnation if you're not human. Same deal, like that woman was capable of offing her kid with a pillow because she didn't see it. She didn't see him as human. And I think that's sort of Cronenberg sort of folding who we are as a society into his vision. So from there, we meet Saul and what's Saul's girlfriend's name? Caprice. Yeah. That contraption that he sleeps in, very Videodrome, almost like the way that shit is lit and the color palette for it also reminded me a lot of Existence and also of Naked Lunch on some level.
See, that was that bed, and then his chair, the breakfaster, as it's called, both really reminded me. The breakfaster more than anything reminded me of Naked Lunch, because it's like all of those things seem alive, but they're not. We find out that bed actually regulates his pain receptors because he can feel pain. In a world where nobody feels pain, he feels pain because his body is able to grow organs.
Yeah, so he has a condition called advanced evolution syndrome. And he's also an artist. He's a performance artist. And the statement behind that is that, you know, all of society has sort of evolved in this really dark, ugly way that now art is now people cutting themselves, people performing surgery on themselves because they can't feel anything. And there's a whole subgenre of artists that can feel things, and they're like the really highly sought after artists because you're watching the real deal, right? All these people that can't feel something are getting off watching this dude feel something.
Right.
But it causes him great pain, and to have these things removed, and it's just such a dark and like really easily foreseeable future for people, right? Like really, Cronenberg has got his finger on the pulse of whatever zeitgeist is currently driving us as a species, in my opinion. Like he really hits the nail on the head in terms of like what we keep going down the path we're going down right now as a species. We are absolutely headed for this, where just empathy is not a thing anymore, right?
And that's going even like back to Videodrome. Like Videodrome was this whole like like quote unquote like homeless shelters that are TVs, and the company just seeking out the most disturbing things they can find to put on one specific channel. And like then you fast forward like 20 years, and there's like horrific websites out there that show like beheadings and stuff, and people find that as entertainment. And it's like, all right, cool. There's a difference between a beheading in a horror movie and a real life beheading. And people go out and seek this stuff now. Well, and like he predicted it before it happened.
And if you look at the time that Videodrome was made, cable TV was really big at the time. The 24-hour news cycle had just become a thing. Like, I don't think a lot of Gen Zers or even later millennials realized that there was a time where the news only came on twice a day, in the morning and in the evening.
Right.
And in between, you weren't constantly bombarded with every headline as it happened. And that really started around the time that Videodrome was made. CNN became a thing, and I think that was the first 24-hour news cycle. And Videodrome was very much a statement about like human beings' insatiable need to be entertained all of the time, right? And you know, it's the reason that we elect people like Donald Trump president, because we care more about entertainment and it's spectacle than we do about progress. But and Crimes of the Future is sort of just the natural evolution of that thought, right? That like, okay, now we live in like postmodern version of that, where entertainment isn't even really a thing anymore. Right now, like the things that entertain us now, like it's not even entertainment in Crimes of the Future. These people are getting some level of like sexual gratification from watching people cut themselves. And
that's even actually brought up in later in, like just basically the next two sequences, we are actually introduced to the people who run National Organ Registry. We meet Whippet, which is an interesting. Everyone's got really weird names in this movie. We got Whippet and Timlin.
Timlin, who is I'm trying to think of the names of
Kristen Stewart.
Kristen Stewart, and the guy that plays Whippet is he passed away unfortunately in 2020.
No shit, I didn't know that.
So they made this movie, or no, I'm thinking of a different guy. I'm sorry.
Oh my god,
I can't remember who played Whippet. No, I was thinking about this guy that was in that movie You're Next that passed away. Anyway, doesn't matter. Scott Speedman plays Lang. Scott Speedman, you guys might know from The Invisible Man. He was also the brother in Haunting of Hill House. Fantastic actor. Really, he's so good at playing just like a smarmy bad guy, right? Just like a truly like slimy bad guy.
And I think his role in this movie is the best example of a misdirect. Because you really think, all right, so before we get to that, we go to the National Organ Registry. We end up actually finding out that the registry simply only exists so that they can register Saul's organs. Because at this point in time, he's pretty much the only one who's just naturally growing organs. That they know of. That's correct.
And that's like one of the central plots is that they're certain that there are other people who can do what Saul can do. And then, again, this brings it back to like the Naked Lunch vibe, that there's this air of paranoia throughout the film. There's a very film noir aspect to it of it's sort of this, seedy underbelly story of like crime, right? There's the crime from Crimes of the Future is that there's this air of paranoia with the National Organ Registry that they are some sort of nefarious, like nebulous organization that is not doing what they say they're doing.
No, and they totally are. It turns out that it's the governments of the world that's way worse.
Yeah.
But it's fucked. They show that, or they explain that tattooing the organs is a way of registering them. So they tattoo these organs, and as they examine,
specifically is the person that tattoos Saul's organs. And
correct.
There's even a little like tete-a-tete between them towards the beginning of the film where he's like, why don't you do something like a traditional tattoo, like an anchor or a heart? And mother. And she just sort of laughs at him. And it's that, again, I love these little nods to being an artist that you see in certain directors' films. And that's totally Cronenberg being like, don't fucking tell me what to do.
Literally.
I'm going to tattoo whatever I tattoo and you're going to like it.
So Whippet and Timlin are invited by Caprice to come to this art show, the surgery that they're about to do.
It's supposed to be this groundbreaking thing that's never happened before. And like I already said, Saul has started to produce a hormone that has never existed before. And that's like a new thing, is that he's now producing not just extra livers and extra kidneys. He's producing glands now that produce hormones that have not existed. And this, on some level might be the key to helping the rest of humanity evolve the way that they all want to. So she invites them to this art show that's very ominous art show. And I think, doesn't he also say it's going to be his last one?
Yeah, he's claiming it's potentially going to be his last one, which we find out very quickly could potentially not be the issue, the situation at all. We also, before the art show, were introduced to the mechanics, Router and Burst.
What are you going to do to get the name Burst?
I don't know, but it's not even spelled. I had to look it up because I went to write it like Burst, and I was like, that's spelled with an E, not a U. And I was like, oh, all right, Cronenberg.
Greg and I once met these two cats after a rave that were named Krusty and Noodle. All right, to be fair, we ate a lot of LSD that night, and a lot of other, we were definitely experiencing reality differently than normal people. But I remember repeatedly that night being like, what do you have to do in the rave scene to earn the nickname Krusty or Noodle? I don't want to know what you had to do to be named Noodle. So we meet the mechanics, and the mechanics are an interesting part of this whole narrative because they could not have been in the story and it would not have affected the story really in any way, right? You could have removed those two people. I'm not saying the institution of the mechanics, but you could have removed those two people from the story and it wouldn't have It wouldn't have mattered. It's just sort of like, a little accent mark.
So I actually had that exact thought watching this. This is my third time watching this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it hit me that they could have taken those two characters out and replaced both of them just with Timlin. Because the end result of this movie, Timlin did what she did to misdirect everybody.
Yeah.
And if she then did the following thing that those two mechanics do to the father.
Yeah. So the mechanics, the mechanics are basically nefarious people that are trying to put down this conspiracy that's happening. So this is a good point. This is a good part to bring Lang into the discussion.
Yeah.
So Lang, the father of the boy that gets killed in the very beginning of the film, it turns out as part of this like weird underground rebellion of people that are trying to like fast forward humanity's evolution and get everybody on the same playing field. And again, this is a very Cronenberg thing to tie like geopolitical elements into it. Like there's a class system, and there's a class of people that can afford to watch other people suffer but doesn't want to suffer themselves. Again, that's something you see repeated a lot in horror, and it's very timely as for right now. There's definitely a ruling class in our real society that can afford to not suffer and sort of gets off on watching all the people that can. I heard somebody say recently, nobody's really trying to fix anything. Everybody's just trying to make enough money that the problems that exist don't affect them. And
it's true.
It's a pretty true statement. And you see that in Crimes of the Future. So the mechanics are the people that are trying to like quell this rebellion. And their way of shuffling folks loose their mortal coil is real. It's very Cronenberg, it's very body horror, and it's very brutal. They like to drill into people's heads with this, not even like a special space drill. Like, you figure Cronenberg could at least give them like a future drill. Like, no, dude, that's like a do-all. Like, that's like my dad has that drill.
I loved it. I thought it was a perfect instrument to use, too, because he could have gone like Existence style and completely, I mean, even when it comes down to the rip thing, like the zipper mechanic thing that he uses, the thing looks like a talk boy. Do you remember the talk boys from back in the day? It looks like that with an extra button on it. I was just like, is that a fucking, did they just repurpose a talk boy?
It's an interesting juxtaposition that in this world that's so steeped in biotechnology and so steeped in where technology has really, really gotten out of control, and that the mechanics use such an analog thing. It's such it's such a non-digital thing to off people. Because at the end of the day, we are just flesh and blood, right? Like we are just like big meat sacks, and like you can't just kill the mind of a big meat sack. You got to drill a hole in that bitch. Yeah.
And I mean, even using something that's like you said, handheld and analog, all of the surgery is done remotely. Like nobody's hand-holding anything. Buttons, they're so far distanced, all the way up to the end, where he is at the complete opposite side of the room doing an autopsy. Like he's not even next to the kid.
Well, and it again, that kind of harkens back to the idea of like dehumanization, right? Like one of the reasons that the society is so comfortable with doing this thing is because they can disassociate, right?
Right.
When I was a kid, my dad took me hunting one time, and I shot a deer from quite a distance, and then I had to field dress that deer. And that's why I don't like hunting, because I was fine from whatever distance I was killing that thing, because I wasn't really killing anything. I pointed a gun at something, I pulled the trigger, it hit that thing, but it was through a scope, and there was a dissociation there. And then I got up to it, and all of a sudden, no, this is a real dead thing that I have to now cut open and root through, and I didn't want to do that. And that is real apparent in Crimes of the Future. In what you're talking about, in their version of surgery, right? Like the idea that it's not really like they are doing surgery, but like they're not really doing it, right?
It almost, even the surgeries almost are like a game. It's like Simon. It's all color coordinated, and it's just they're disconnected like they are.
The other thing we forgot to mention is not only they evolved to not feel pain, human beings have evolved to not to infection no longer. Like
they can't get sick.
They can't get sick.
Yep.
So like they don't even have to use like gloves or be sanitary when they're performing surgery now, because human beings are no longer susceptible to infection.
You say like we don't even need to wash our hands anymore. Can't imagine.
Which is gross.
So we go to the art show and Caprice removes this tattooed organ from Saul and then puts it in a jar. Timlin and Whippet are both at this art show. I love the fact that both of them seem super uncomfortable the entire time the surgery's happening too, because it's like they run this registry and yet this is something that they're not comfortable with. Well, at least that's how it seems. Timlin then approaches Saul and
like
basically,
fangirls out on it, essentially.
Yeah, and in most Cronenberg fashion possible, it's just like, hey, surgery is the new sex. I want you to cut me open, which is just like, okie dokie then. Like,
yeah. Well, and I mean, off break, it's funny because when you watch this movie a second time, there's so many things you catch that you should have caught the first time, and that Timlin is ultimately a villain, and ultimately has ulterior motives, is real obvious from the very beginning, from the very first time you see her.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, she basically tells Saul off break, hey, try to jump those bones. And I love Saul's response when he's like, I'm not good at old sex.
Yeah, old sex.
Yeah.
That's still my favorite. It's one of my favorite scenes. And if you go to my Instagram, I posted that scene in my story of her getting her hands inside his mouth. That scene still makes me uncomfortable, but I fucking love it because it makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it's just, who does that? Obviously there's sex isn't a thing that is normal anymore in that future society. So surgeries and internal organ, obviously removal and alteration and replacement and body modifications turned up to 11 have become the new thing to do.
Yeah. Well, so Timlin introduces Saul to. She works for the National Organ Registry, supposedly, and she introduces Saul to those guys from this meeting. So from there, Timlin introduces Saul to the National Organ Registry guys, who basically tell Saul, "Hey, we want you to work your way into this underground organization that's trying to undermine us and trying to undermine you and trying to jumpstart evolution. We want you to work your way into that and get us in there." And Saul's like, okay. Reluctantly so, I would say, but he does it. So he ends up meeting Lang. And Lang basically says, hey, what I need from you is for you to do a live autopsy on your stream of my kid and show that his organs naturally, so we can show that his organs naturally evolved to be able to process this toxic candy bar thing that his organization has made, this big purple plastic candy bar that's made of plastic and toxic waste and shit. And so Saul agrees after some time. Saul's basically I don't really want to do that, but I think it's that his the artist in him wins out and is this is the ultimate art, right?
You can definitely see that internal struggle that he's dealing with when he's initially approached, and then he brings that conversation up to Caprice, and Caprice is immediately obviously slightly put off by it, but she is I want to do the surgery.
Yep.
You're all right.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that's Caprice as an artist, right? And that's just this is art now.
Mm-hmm.
So Saul does agree to do the surgery, and then I think shortly thereafter that is when Timlin tries to seduce him essentially, and he's just nah.
Yeah.
Nah. So then he goes and sees who's the guy that gives him the zipper.
They never give a name, and because the name was never mentioned in the movie, I didn't even bother looking his name up, right, because he's literally in 2 scenes in the entire film.
Yeah, it's true. Right. So Saul goes to a black market body modifier, which is the thing that gets Saul off, right? Is getting black market body modified essentially. So he gets a zipper installed in his stomach, real similar, like Rob said, to chest vagina in Videodrome. And then there's this really odd, it's a sex scene, and it's absolutely Caprice filleting him, but it's her filleting his weird zipper wound. Which, that's probably the most classic Cronenberg moment in this film. And that's one of those things where I love body horror because of how uncomfortable that scene made me. Where I was just I had to I saw that scene coming and had to pause it for a second and do some jumping jacks and crack my knuckles and be we could do We could do this. And I got through it.
The best part of that scene is she goes in and she like puts her mouth to the wound, and then the camera moves up and it's just on his face, and he's clearly into it, but he then follows "Don't let it spill out,"
Yep.
which is like he's open, like his guts could fall out, and that's what he's worried about. He's like, hey, don't let my insides fall out. And it's just like, oh my god. Oh.
Yep.
But when he goes to get that riptide put in, he's also told that he's been entered into the inner beauty contest, and it's some like contest of like a beauty contest, but it's for internal organs.
Yep.
And so he's getting this thing.
It's for organ-driven body modification.
That's right.
So like there's a contestant that's just covered in ears that he supposedly spontaneously grew, but then it turns out he didn't.
No.
And that now becomes the central narrative of the film, right? That like now we realize the reason the society is so paranoid is because people are trying to figure out who actually has these modifications happening naturally and who is either sewing ears on themselves or like injecting themselves the hormone to make themselves grow something.
Yeah.
And that has been exposed as like, oh, this is why everything has felt so tense up until now, because Saul is clearly the only person we know of that's actually spontaneously growing new organs, whereas everybody else is just sort of, it's put up.
Right.
And it's funny because I think the ear guy was meant to be like the single upsetting thing that people focused on in this film. It was the thing that was like shown briefly in the trailer, and like truly it's not. It's like maybe the most normalized thing in this film. It was the dude with the ears all over him. I was like, oh yeah, it's Cronenberg.
Yeah, I mean, in that sequence is even just introduced with his eyes are already sewn shut, and they are finishing the last few stitches on his mouth, sewing his mouth shut. And I actually wrote down, there's like a voiceover in that scene. I wrote it down because I was like, oh, okay, like this makes a lot more sense. And this is something I missed the first two times I watched it. I was like, how did I not hear this audio when I watched it the first two times? But there's an overlaying audio. It says, it is time to stop seeing. It is time to stop speaking. It is time to listen.
Sure.
And then the dude just busts into the weird interpretive dance move for like ever.
I do remember that voiceover, and I remember thinking like, if I was in that crowd, my reaction to that would have been like, that's some hippie bullshit. We're past the point of listening, bro. Like people are eating plastic at this point. The hippies lost. All right, like, the environmentalists lost. Like, sorry, Greta Thunberg. Like, I was really rooting for you, but it turns out that the people who were not willing to curb their lifestyle in any way actually did win. So, like, but in that context in the movie, I think it's a great, like, that dude's a great sort of, not red herring, but like, it's just sort of like reminding you that like even in this completely nihilistic, emotionless future, there's still like the bleeding heart guy. It's time to listen. Like, shut up. It's not time to listen, dude.
I mean, even at the end too, Caprice even kind of becomes that type with her whole dialogue during the autopsy. She goes into it, and as an artist who doesn't make art anymore and hasn't for years, after you do your own type of art for so long, it's only a matter of time until you start doing what other people have been doing.
Sure.
And I think that's really where it ended up at the end. They wanted to take the next big step and do something that had not been done. We're going to do surgery on something that isn't alive. Yeah. This thing isn't going to be deriving any pleasure or anything from this. It's dead.
Yeah. Well, and so, the rest of the movie pretty much leads up to this autopsy. And
yes.
And it turns out that Lang has been played the entire time, right before the autopsy happens. Like, Lang, the mechanics have already had eyes on him the entire time. Like, have not even there was no reason for Saul to be involved in it except as a distraction, except as a look over here. It turns out Timlin has been working with the mechanics the entire time. So Saul goes to do the autopsy, and what I do, this is again, when Greg and I watched this the first time, this has made me so uncomfortable. There is like a 20-minute scene where there's just a naked 10-year-old boy on a table, and it's just uncomfortable. Like, it's just uncomfortable to look at a naked child like that, and it should be. And, it's sort of a litmus test in my mind. Like, if you watch this and you're uncomfortable, cool, we can still be friends. Like, if you watch this and you're just like, meh, it's Tuesday. Like, that's the end of our friendship. But I think that element adds to the overall just how uncomfortable that autopsy is for everybody.
Oh yeah.
And you, like you said, you get the sense that everyone in that room watching that happen, and everyone watching it happen on a live stream, has this epiphanic moment where they're like, "What kind of monster am I that I'm watching this?" So then, before they can even really process that, it turns out that the organs inside this kid were artificially grown and artificially put there by Timlin to aid, in her mind, to aid the rebellion that was trying to like forward everybody's evolution. And just like you had the feeling the whole time that there was another shoe that was going to drop. You're just like, there's another piece of this narrative that I haven't seen yet that is going to throw it for a left. And that's it. And so right as that happens, the mechanic cuts to like the mechanics murdering Lang with the drills. And you get this, or at least I got this stark feeling that like none of these characters matter, really, right? Like that all of these characters are disposable in this universe. Everyone in this universe is absolutely expendable as a person.
Oh yeah.
So Saul then decides, like, I'm never doing anything like this ever again. Like, the organ registry, like, approaches him, and they're like, you're going to do this. And he's like, actually, I'm not going to do anything like that ever again. And then one of the best things that I've seen in any horror movie, or the best endings to any horror movie, I think that I really love the ending of this movie. So after telling the organ registry that he's not going to do this, Saul spends some time soul searching and really goes back and forth. He kind of has this inkling that like maybe I am the next stage of evolution, and he has one of those purple plastic candy bars and he takes a bite out of it. And the movie literally ends with it closing in on him and him crying, like just like a single tear, and him smiling like, oh my God, I'm finally not in pain. And it turns out
I love the fact that the chair, the breakfaster.
Oh yeah,
it's like his bed. They both register how he's feeling inside, and that chair he takes the first bite, he swallows it, the chair stops moving because this is like, oh, he doesn't need help digesting or getting anything moved down anymore.
He's reached peak.
And I literally, my last note in here that I wrote just says he swallows, he's at peace, because he's at such peace at the end where he's just like, oh, this is exactly it. But it's also, he is the natural evolution that Lang had altered himself to become.
Sure.
And it's like,
well, and I think you get the feeling that you finally realize what it is that Saul's been struggling with the entire film, like why he's been at ill ease, not even like physically, but why there's just been an unresolved something that they never tell you what it is throughout the movie, that like something has happened to Saul his entire life that he's like, and you get the feeling that like maybe he ate plastic when he was a little kid and was fine, and somebody told him, hey, you can't do that, so he hasn't the rest of his life. And this is the constant pain and the growing of organs is the price that he's paid for not honoring his natural process. And he finally has in those last few minutes, right? He's finally honored that process and is at peace, like you said. Now it's kind of like if you are lactose intolerant. I'm semi-lactose intolerant. I love cheese and I love ice cream, dude. And it's a decision every time I eat them. And that's what I'm saying, is that like knowing full well that my body is not built to process that shit correctly, but I'm still going to eat it. And like, so I can relate to Saul on that level, that just like, I want to be a cheese eater. You know what I mean? And like, but for him, it's like, I know that I cannot be a plastic eater because that's not accepted. And I don't want to be this, and I think throughout the film, there's probably an element where he's like, fuck, I'm going to be these people's messiah if I come out as the first person that can naturally eat this plastic bar without having to be modified in some way. So yeah, I think, all around, this movie is very Cronenberg. It's almost meta Cronenberg in a way, like you said, because there's so many nods to different Cronenberg properties in it. This is the first Cronenberg film that I've seen that really led me to believe there's a shared universe with Cronenberg.
Oh, absolutely.
You can really start connecting dots between, like you said, Videodrome and Existence and Crimes of the Future. They're not necessarily all happening in chronological order,
right?
But they are all happening in the same universe, in my mind.
Yeah.
it's
even to a point, the 1970 Crimes of the Future, the whole entire movie is about skin replacement, like people getting their flesh replaced. It's before organs and before people lost pain, there was that. So you could even add that in there. I was tempted today to watch them back to back, but I was just like, that's just too much for my brain to process in one day. So I didn't do it. I was just like, I'm gonna hold off.
I hear you.
I'll do that another time.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I really liked it. Again, I have a number of Cronenberg films that I own, two of which I own because of you, and thank you. It's a decision to watch a Cronenberg film for me, right? Like, it's not something that I don't watch it casually, right? Like, I'm not just gonna like put Naked Lunch on and go about my day with that in the background. Although when I just recently got Naked Lunch, the Criterion Collection on Blu-ray. Again, thanks to you. You pointed out to me it was on sale on Amazon, and I was like, boom. And the day that it came, I really did do that, though. I just sort of, like, put it on and spaced out in the living room. And then, like, maybe 45 minutes into it, realized that, like, my 8-month-old daughter was watching Cronenberg with me, and I was like, no, that can't happen. And immediately turned it off. But, yeah, I really love Crimes of the Future. I love that I don't feel the need to watch it very often. I love that it sits with me so heavily that, like, I'm not going to forget a lot that happened in that.
Yeah. Videodrome is easily my favorite. I mean, that's like, I feel like that's baseline. It's everybody's favorite, but it's my favorite because the very first time I saw it, I was way too young to see it, but I had a huge crush on Debbie. Yeah,
we all were.
I had a huge crush on Debbie Harry, and I was just like, I also loved Blondie. I mean, I still do, but seeing her in that, I was just like, oh, she's in this. That is one of the few where I know for a fact I can just throw it on, and I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm watching Videodrome. This one I've only watched 3 times for that exact reason. It's just the same as Brand
too much. Yeah.
It is. Oh, it's way too much, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it's too much in the way that I imagine Videodrome was too much in the 80s, right? Like, I imagine that people were really off-put by Videodrome in the 80s and 90s. I imagine that was probably, it's kind of like what you were saying about Cronenberg was worried that science was progressing so fast that by the time he made this movie, people would be like, "Nah, it's like having an iPod, bro. What even is that?" And like that's what Videodrome is now to us. But like, keep in mind that in the '80s, man, that was like, I'm sure that hit real hard for a lot of people. I'm sure there were a lot of like cable executives that were like, Are we the bad guys? We're the bad guys, right?
All right. So, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. It means the world to me. I'd love to. Jason Michael wants to have you back with both of us at some point. We're going to do another Cronenberg movie for sure. We like to end every single episode by thanking people.
Oh, sure.
This would not have happened if it wasn't, for example, like we always thank you and Jordan and Camp Nightmare and Bree. Jason Michael and I wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for you guys. Sure. This podcast, this stream would never have happened if it wasn't for you. So we like to give thanks to people at the end of every episode, no matter what it's for, whoever it's for. If somebody held the door for you today and you want to say thank you, go for it. But I'll let you go forward if you have anyone you want to thank.
I'll say thank you to my buddy Stefan Zimmerman at Stefan, Stefan Edward, EDWARD, at Stefan Edward on Instagram. He's a singer-songwriter buddy of mine, but he also he was my first podcast co-host on my first podcast ever. And he was so gracious to like indulge my just curiosity and like, could I be a podcaster? Like, and he's really the reason that I do it still. And I shout out to Kevin Smith, Smodcast. Literally, Kevin Smith. The reason that I decided I wanted to do a podcast is I heard a podcast with Kevin Smith where he's like, man, the only thing you need to do a podcast is a microphone and something that you're super passionate about. And and that was a podcast called Two Scoops back in the day. I don't know what it's on. It might still be on SoundCloud. I don't know. But if you guys ever get a chance, listen to Two Scoops. That was some funny shit. And of course, thank Jordan, because like Jordan, when I came to him with the idea for Camp Nightmare, man, I think he was like, "What's a podcast?" And Jordan's a producer of a lot of things, media-wise. Like he's a music producer, he's a filmmaker. He had never done podcasts, and You know, if you go back and listen to like season 1 of Camp Nightmare, like it's real apparent that we have no idea what we're doing. But Jordan stuck with it, man, and it stuck with me through also what was maybe the hardest time in my life was right when we started Camp Nightmare. So thanks to Jordan. Shout out to my high school English teacher, Larry Weinhold. He's dead, but that dude is the reason that I am as well read as I am. That dude used to smuggle books into my private Christian high school to give me to read, stuff like On the Road and Steinbeck that I wasn't allowed to read at this private school. He would smuggle them into me. A shout out to my partner Karen. Thank you to Karen for continually supporting and indulging my hobbies. It's the best thing ever made. She will never listen to any of these. Like she's not this type of podcast listener, but but she is the most supportive person ever when it comes to just creating space for me to do this stuff. So those are my thanks.
Awesome. Well, obviously, I'm going to thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for creating an amazing community. I want to give a quick shout out to, speaking of communities, Horror Community News, who actually happens to be the Swedish horror nerd here on Instagram. Jason Michael, you're in the chat. I want to thank you. I want to let you know I miss you still, and I can't wait till you're back and we can chit chat again. Yeah.
I remember when Jordan and I used to talk to each other that sweetly. That's a lot. Jordan and I have an amazing rapport with each other off the mic as well. Like I don't even want to spread those rumors. Before I go, I also want to thank two more things. I want to thank Bree. Bree is legit the glue that holds Jordan and I together, and I say that without any irony whatsoever. She and you know, I don't think that I thank her enough for how much of a connecting and like grounding presence she is for Jordan and I, which is funny because she would tell you that she's the opposite of grounding. She would tell you that she's completely frenetic and stream of consciousness and always full of anxiety, and all of those things are true, but for some reason that really does ground us.
Yeah.
And so like just we wouldn't be able to do what we do without her. So thank you to her, and thank you to you guys for having me. You know, I love the sound of my own voice. That's why I do all of this. And it was so nice for you guys to create another space where I can do most of the talking and usurp somebody's show from them. So thank you.
Thank you again. I've been Rob.
I'm JB.
Until next week, sleep tight, suckers. Thank you again. I love you, man. I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Hell yeah.
So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming through. It was a bit of a different layout this time. We spoke for about an hour, not even about the movie. It was really great. We got political on here, something that obviously Jason Michael and I are very passionate about, is just being outspoken about the things that we believe in and the things that we think are wrong with this world. And it was really great to have JB on to speak his mind on things that we both agree on. But yeah, thank you so much for everybody and JB tonight for this awesome episode. We will see you next week. I have a returning guest coming back next week to talk slasher, a specific slasher. I'm very excited for this one. If you like 90s slasher movies, come back next week.